Today we're going to talk about decimal place value. Decimal place value has so many different parts to it that I want to kind of give you a summary video of them. So the very first form that a decimal is written in is standard form. You and I know this. This is the most common form to write a decimal. We write it numerically. Another form that we work with is expanded form. This is simply writing the digit and multiplying it by the place value that digit's in. So let me show you an example. We have 2 and 32 hundredths. Well, the 2 is in the ones place. So I want to make sure that anybody who reads this number understands that 2 is in the ones place. The way I do this by taking the 2 and multiplying it by 1 for the place value. Next, I'm going to switch up the colors so you can kind of get an idea and follow with me. I'm going to add the next digit and the place value that it's in. So we're working with the digit of 3, and I want to make sure that I place that 3 in the tenths place. Okay, so 3 times 1/10. The last digit that we see is a 2 in the hundredths place. So once again, I'm going to add the next order of operations. We're working with the digit 2, and we're multiplying it by the hundredths place. So logically, if I add these up and solve these, I am going to end up with 2 and 32 hundredths. Okay? The last form that a decimal is often written in is word form. So let's take the same decimal that we just worked with, and I can read this decimal out loud. Oftentimes it's a huge misconception that people say 2.32. Well, we want to make sure that we're a little bit clear on that. The 2 is in the ones place, so we'll write out 2. The decimal point represents the and statement. Anytime you write a check, I know as students you're not used to writing checks, you don't have a bank account, but if you ask your parents to watch them write a check out, they use the word form commonly underneath the amount. So it's very important that we don't write 2.32, but we say 2 and 32. Now, I want to stop right here and just tell you that it's very, very important that we don't stop at saying 32. 32 is often the ones place. If you say I have $32 or 32 cards or 32 jelly beans, it represents the ones place. And I know that my 32 does not stop in the ones place. It actually stops in the hundredths place. So I want to write hundredths right after. Same thing if I had a number that looks like this. So when I'm looking at this particular number, I want to make sure that I understand what this number is. So my first amount that I see is 12. And remember, there's that decimal point. And that 6 is in the thousandths place. So when I write 6, I want to also make sure that I follow it up with thousandths. Okay. The last thing I want to mention is the place value of each digit. When you move from each place value, the ones place to the tens place, the tens place to the hundreds place, each place value is worth 10. That's why we call it powers of 10. That's also why we've used exponents, because every time you use an exponent, you're dealing with powers of 10. 1 times 10 is 10. That's why we mention it and label it as the ones place and then the tens place. 10 times 10 is 100. That's why we have a tens place and a hundreds place. So it can get a little confusing when we're comparing digits in each place value. First of all, I want to recognize that you understand which place value these 9s are in. So we're looking at 12 and 996 thousandths. And what we're going to end up doing is we're going to compare these two 9s. Well, the first 9 is in the tens place. So I'm just going to make a little note. This is important to kind of keep my brain focused. The second place value is the hundredths place. Okay, and we've talked about that when you go from one to the other, they're worth 10. So you're often going to use a statement that sounds like this. Change colors real quick. 9 in the 10th place is 10 times greater than the 9 in the hundredths place. When you compare the tenths to the hundredths, it is 10 times greater. We want to make sure that this is understood, which it can be a little bit tricky. So if it is 10 times greater than the hundredths place, we can then flip the statement, switch it up, and the opposite will reign true. So the 9 in the hundredths place is, now this time the hundredths, remember, is less than the tenths place. So we're going to write this as a fraction. You can either say is 1/10 less or 10 times less. Than the 9 in the tenths place. So this is something where if you're having to move multiple place values, it could be 100 times greater or 1/100th less, 1,000 times greater or 1,000th less. This is probably the most common comparison with decimals and place value that you're going to notice on any kind of major assessment in 5th grade. They want to make sure that you understand that going from place value to place value is either times 10 or divide by 10. So it's very important to understand these comparing statements. So let's do another one. Let's say we have a number of 3 and 36 thousandths. Well, right away we have a 3 in the ones place, and then we end up having a 3 in the hundredths place. So when you're comparing the blue 3 or the 3 in the ones place, this 3 in the ones place is 100 times greater than the 3 in the hundredths place. This is the reason being because when you're comparing the 3, you have to end up moving 2 place values. And again, each place value is worth 10. So times 10 times 10, and 10 to the second power is 100. Well, remember, the opposite statement reigns true. If you're comparing the green 3 to the blue 3 in the ones place, that means that this 3 is 100th times less than the 3 in the ones place. Okay. I hope this helps. I'd highly encourage you to stop, take a look at this screen, and kind of on a separate sheet of paper, create your own decimal and start comparing using these sentences. It'll help you kind of begin to memorize that process.